Okay, the question is, can I hold this phone up for the entire time for this video? We're just gonna have a very low-tech version of video today. This is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. How are you? Thank you for joining me at my channel today. And I'm outdoors. It's a beautiful, gorgeous spring day. We had a really hard freeze and it kind of ruined my flowering trees, but there are a few little blossoms. Normally this would be covered with white blossoms, but this year is just kind of a year where nothing is the way we wanted it to be, right? So the purpose of this video today is just to talk a little bit about the books that I have finished since the last time we did a recent reads video. And the first two books I'd like to talk about are Louise Penny's number 8 and number 9 in the Armand Gamache series, The Beautiful Mystery and How the Light Gets In. And you really can't talk about one without talking about the other, because in the number 8, The Beautiful Mystery, it sets up this huge cliffhanger that will not be resolved until number 9. And so I'd say the stories are linked by the overarching storyline, the peril of Armand Gamache and his lieutenant Jean-Luc. And so in The Beautiful Mystery, it takes place in a monastery, which I'm kind of interested in cloistered or closed off society stories. And so the whole book takes place inside a monastery. There's a murder of one of the brothers, and the whole thing is linked to the formation of Gregorian chanting and how music was created in the Dark Ages. So it's got a lot of musical history and a lot of intrigue about all the characters and what makes you a good candidate to live as a monk. And so I really enjoyed this, but there was also a lot of peril, because there's another storyline that's completely not connected to the mystery at the monastery that is plaguing poor Armand Gamache, and he has to deal with that while he's working in the monastery to solve this very intense murder. And the second book, it's the 9th book, How the Light Gets In, takes that storyline out back into the world, back to Three Pines, which is the little village where many of these books take place, and we get to be reunited with a lot of characters we've loved throughout the series. And it was incredibly tense, scary. I was worried the entire time, and it was really a fantastic addition to the series itself. So, you know, when you're talking about a mystery, you don't really want to talk about any of the particulars. I did feel that perhaps the ending, there were some twists that really were not well explained. They just kind of happened. So it took the experience down from a 5-star read to a 4.5-star read for me. But all in all, these were really books that I really enjoyed reading in the middle of what we're going through. Next book I'd like to talk about is called Separation Anxiety by Laura Zigman. This is a comedy, so if you don't like comic stories, you know, this is definitely not something you'd probably enjoy, but it's the story of a woman who's kind of going through a midlife crisis. She's separated from her husband, but they can't afford to separate, so he lives in the basement and smokes pot, and she is beset with anxiety as well, and so she decides that she will strap their dog to her in a sling, and she just starts going through life with this dog attached to her as she's trying to figure out her life. So a bit of a ridiculous situation. There is a little bit of seriousness in it, in that she is dealing with her broken marriage, and she also has a best friend who is in the final stages of cancer, and so that part of the story is serious. But for the most part, it's along the lines of Where Did You Go, Bernadette? So if you like that type of comic writing with some serious stuff mixed in, you might enjoy this book. I enjoyed it. It wasn't the best thing I've read, but I really did feel that it was like a 2-day read. So, and I listened to it on audiobook, sped up, and it accompanied me as I was doing all my stuff around the house. And so anyway, if you like that kind of book, I recommend it. I read an historical novel called Beheld by TaraShea Nesbit, and this was the story of the Plymouth colony, but it's a twist on it because it's not just kind of idolizing the Pilgrims, but it is instead kind of taken from multiple perspectives, including indentured servants who didn't even want to be there. They were told they would be going to the Virginia colony and instead ended up in Plymouth in this hardscrabble, terrible place, and at the kind of mercy of the Pilgrims and their politics and their severe punishments for going outside of the religion and the doctrines of the religion. And so there's a lot of politics, and also it's told from the perspective of some of the women who were also part of the colony. And so you get to see it from a different perspective, not just the religious pioneer perspective, but what it was actually like to be bearing children and losing so many children to various diseases and miscarriages. And it's a short novel, and it really paints a nice alternative to the Pilgrim story we've always been hearing about. I finished The Nightfire by Michael Connelly. This is a number 3 in the Renee Ballard / Harry Bosch detective series, and they are working together. Very typical for the series. There's really nothing that jumps out at me as being like remarkable, but very comfortable, like an old shoe. You put it on and you go through the days with these two characters and their various struggles. So as usual, mystery not as important as the actual relationships. And yeah, so I'd just say it was probably a 3.5-star read. The last 2 books I'd like to talk about are both set in the late 90s, both about women in their late 20s to close to 30, but they could not be more different from each other. The first one is Writers and Lovers by Lily King, which is a really heartwarming character study about a woman who has gone to graduate school. She's very enamored with the writing world, and she is trying to write her novel. She's been writing it for 6 years. Her mother recently died, so she's in deep grief for losing her mother. She is not at all connected with her father because he's really a terrible person, and then she has a bad breakup. So she's single, struggling, very poor. She's a waitress, and we get to really see the world of what it's like in that restaurant. We meet all of the people who work there, their various agendas. She has a best friend who's a more successful writer, and then she meets 2 different men, and so there's dating, there's romance. She's going through a lot, so it's kind of a quarter-life crisis, maybe, type book. But I really liked the writing. I really, really liked the main character, and I can't say enough. This was like a 5-star read for me, and it was a warm hug of a book, which I guess I needed at the time. I don't know how the sun is looking on my face right now. The other book that is kind of a similar scenario, it's not a similar scenario, but it's a similar character. It's the late 90s. A woman who's totally untethered, and she's untethered because she's had a sexual relationship with a teacher for many years, and he is finally being outed by some other women as having abused them too, and this main character defends him, even though, you know, she loves him and she doesn't want to see him get in trouble for what happened. But she's very much affected by what happened to her from him, and she is unable to get going in her life, and she's being pressured by outside forces to tell her story. So it's a dual timeline. It goes back and forth between the past, when he was actually grooming her and luring her in. He uses Nabokov's Lolita as a way to like flatter her intelligence, saying she'd be the only person he knew that could understand the book. And, you know, it's so blatant what he's doing, and yet she's very charmed and flattered by his attentions. And the school where they're at is terrible in terms of when some of the information comes out, she is the one who's punished and not him. So there's a lot of dynamics going on. I thought it was a really strong story and very disturbing, and lots of trigger warnings if, you know, this is something that you would not be comfortable reading. But I thought it was a really good book, and it would be a good book club book. I think probably generate a lot of discussion. I'm reading a book called In This House of Brede by Rumer Godden, which was written, I think, in the late 60s. It's the story of a woman who had a semi-successful business career. I mean, she was rising in the ranks as much as women were allowed to rise in the ranks. And she was 42 and she decides to become a nun. So that's as much as I know about it. I started reading it last night. It's got a real 50s, 60s sensibility to the writing. But I think I'm really going to enjoy it because it's talking about the process of what she went through to become a nun. It's a novel, but in the author's note, the author said that she spoke with lots of nuns who were in this Benedictine nunnery. Is that what it's called? Nunnery. And so the stories are based on stories that she was told, although it's not based on any one real person. So I'm kind of fascinated by cloistered religious organizations and the stories of what it takes to belong and to kind of sacrifice your own outside life to belong to a group. And so I'm looking forward to reading it and seeing how it comes across. I think I was inspired by reading that Louise Penny book about the monastery mystery. So this is kind of a companion to that. And yeah, that's what I've been reading. I have one suggestion for a video. It is called, I'm going to link it below, it's called Take Me to the World, and it's a celebration of Stephen Sondheim's 90th birthday, and they just got all these different Broadway performers to sing Sondheim songs from their homes. And so it's 2.5 hours, I think, but there's timestamps in the description box, so you can just jump around to your favorite performers. There's a kind of stunning performance with Meryl Streep and Audra McDonald and Christine Baranski that's really good, the three of them singing a song together. So if you're a Broadway fan, if you like Sondheim, you might really enjoy this. There's a whole bunch of different artists that you'll recognize and some you won't, but that's what's making me happy, and that's what I have to offer for today. Thank you for putting up with this low-tech version of my video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye.